His eyes burned into hers, filled with years of silence. It didn't matter anymore. You chose him. I told myself it was for the best. That he could give you everything I couldn't. Her tears slipped free. But he didn't. The air between them pulsed, unbearable. Daniel's hands clenched into fists, the conflict tearing him apart. Don't make me cross this line, Amara. If I do, there's no going back. She rose slowly, crossing the space between them, her body trembling with both fear and need. She stopped just in front of him, close enough to feel the heat of his body. Maybe there's nothing left to go back to, she whispered. His breath shuddered. His hands hovered near her, fighting the war between desire and loyalty. And then, as though surrendering to a truth too heavy to resist, he touched her cheek. Gently, reverently, like he had been waiting years for the right to do so. Her eyes fluttered shut. A sob escaped her, half relief, half devastation. Their foreheads touched, breaths mingling, a heartbeat away from ruin. But at the last moment, Daniel tore himself back, his chest heaving. No, he rasped, standing abruptly. Not like this. Not while you're still his. Amara collapsed back into the chair, her face in her hands, sobbing silently. Daniel turned away, pacing toward the door, his fists trembling. He paused, his voice hoarse. You deserve more than stolen moments. You deserve someone who chooses you every time. He broke off, swallowing hard. I can't be half of a man to you. And with that he left, the door closing softly behind him. Amara sat alone in the flickering firelight, her tears soaking her palms. The truth was out now. There was no undoing it. Daniel had wanted her all along. And though they both resisted, the line between them had already cracked. It was only a matter of time before it shattered completely. The shift began quietly, without intention. A calendar full of Adrian's departures left Amara and Daniel in orbit around each other, the twins the gravity that kept them tethered. Every day bled into the next, full of the tiny miracles of early childhood, first coos, first wide-eyed smiles, and with each milestone Adrian missed, Daniel's presence grew more indispensable. It wasn't a choice anymore. It was survival. It happened on a Sunday evening. The sky outside was awash in shades of lavender and slate, the house warm with the glow of lamps. Amara was humming softly as she rocked her son, when suddenly, his tiny body shivered in her arms. Her hum faltered. She touched his forehead, her stomach plummeting. He was burning up. Daniel! Her voice cracked, high and frightened. He was there within seconds, his features sharp with concern. What is it? She held out the baby, panic filling her voice. He's hot, too hot. What's wrong with him? Daniel pressed his palm gently against the infant's brow, his jaw tightening. Fever. We need to get him seen. Now. Amara's breath came shallow, her heart pounding in her ears. Adrian. I'll call him from the car, Daniel interrupted, already pulling out his phone with one hand as he reached for the car seat with the other. Come on. Get your things. The next 20 minutes blurred in a rush of hurried steps, seatbelts snapping, headlights cutting through the dark. Amara clutched her child against her chest in the back seat while Daniel drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his voice steady as he reassured her. He'll be okay. Babies spike fevers. We're getting him to the hospital in time. She tried to breathe, but every sob seemed to strangle her. The emergency room was a blur of bright lights, antiseptic air, and clipped voices. A nurse took the baby gently from Amara's arms, her reassurance practiced but kind. We'll run tests. Sit tight. Amara collapsed into the waiting room chair, trembling uncontrollably. Daniel sat beside her, his hand hovering near hers, unsure if he should touch, desperate to. She buried her face in her palms. What if it's serious? What if I lose him? Daniel's heart clenched. Without hesitation, he covered her trembling hands with his voice low, unshakable. You won't. I swear it. He's strong, like you. He's going to be okay. Her tears soaked through her fingers. I can't do this alone, Daniel. I can't. You're not alone, he whispered fiercely. Not while I'm here. The words slipped out raw, unguarded. He didn't care anymore. For a heartbeat, she lifted her gaze, her tear-streaked eyes meeting his. The world outside the waiting room fell away. Then the nurse returned, carrying the baby wrapped snugly in blankets. It's just an ear infection, she said warmly. We'll prescribe medication. Nothing life-threatening. Relief flooded Amara so hard her body almost gave out. She sobbed openly, pressing her lips against her child's soft hair. Daniel's shoulders sagged, his breath shuddering out. He didn't move his hand from hers. By the time they returned to the mansion, it was past midnight. The baby, drowsy from medication, slept against Amara's chest. Daniel carried the diaper bag, his other hand steadying her as they climbed the stairs. In the nursery, after laying the infant gently in the crib, Amara lingered, her fingers brushing her son's cheek. She turned slowly, her eyes glistening. Thank you, she whispered. Daniel shook his head. You don't need to thank me. I do. Her voice broke. Because if you hadn't been here, if it were just me, I don't know what I would have done. Something fragile cracked between them. Amara stepped closer, exhaustion loosening her restraint. Daniel didn't retreat this time. Their faces hovered inches apart, breaths mingling. But before the moment could consume them, the baby stirred, a small whimper breaking the silence. Amara turned quickly, her hand trembling as she soothed him. Daniel exhaled, dragging a hand through his hair, forcing distance back into the room. I'll stay in the hall tonight, he said hoarsely. In case you need me. She looked at him, her throat aching, words tangled in the mess of longing and guilt. She only nodded. And so, as the storm outside the mansion subsided, Daniel sat vigil in the hall, the door between them thin as paper, both of them wide awake, drowning in the weight of everything they couldn't say. The next morning, Adrian finally called. His voice was smooth, distracted. I got your message. Everything fine now? Amara stared at the phone in disbelief. Our son had a fever. We were at the hospital all night. Yes, but he's fine, right? Adrian asked, his tone more businesslike than worried. Her jaw trembled. He's fine, but I'm not. Do you even care what that was like for me? There was a pause. Then coolly, Amara, you're overwrought. This is why I didn't want children distracting you from being strong. You'll adjust. We'll talk when I get back. And he hung up. Amara lowered the phone, her hands shaking. Across the hall, Daniel's face was stone, his eyes smoldering. Without a word, he crossed the room and gently took the phone from her trembling hand, setting it aside. His touch lingered, grounding her. You don't deserve this, he said quietly. Her tears spilled over, her lips trembling. Then why am I still here? His answer was immediate, certain. Because you love your children. And because you haven't realized yet that there's someone else who sees you. Who always has. The words hung between them, heavy as thunder, undeniable as truth. That night, for the first time, Amara didn't dream of Adrian. She dreamed of Daniel. Of his voice in the hospital waiting room. Of his hand steady on hers. Of the way he saw her, not as leverage, not as obligation, but as someone worth holding through storms. And when she woke, Her heart ached with the knowledge that her life had already shifted. Forced proximity wasn't just circumstance anymore. It was fate. The days after the hospital visit seemed stitched together by an invisible thread, one that bound Amara and Daniel closer no matter how hard they tried to ignore it. Adrian called less and less, his voice always clipped, distracted, impatient. But Daniel was there. Morning and night, steady as breath, moving through the mansion as if it were his unspoken duty to guard not just the twins, but Amara herself. And Amara felt it every time he lingered too long in a doorway, every time his hand brushed hers when passing a bottle, every time their eyes caught and locked on something unspoken. One late afternoon, sunlight streamed golden through the nursery windows. The twins were lying on a blanket, their little fists flailing, their coos filling the room. Amara leaned over them, tickling their bellies, her laughter light and real for the first time in weeks. Daniel knelt beside her, watching. Then, in a moment of whim, he lifted one of the babies gently, blowing a raspberry against his tiny stomach. The baby let out a sudden bubbling giggle, clear and pure. Amara gasped, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" The baby laughed again, and Daniel's face lit with boyish wonder. That was their first laugh. Amara finished breathlessly, tears springing to her eyes. She clapped her hands together, overwhelmed, while Daniel, unable to stop himself, laughed too, his deep chuckle blending with the baby's tiny giggles. The sound filled the nursery like sunlight breaking through clouds. Amara pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, the joy too sharp, too bright. She turned to Daniel, her smile wet with tears. "You gave them their first laugh." Daniel's expression softened, reverent. "No," he whispered, looking at her. "You did. I just helped it out." The way he looked at her then, like she was the miracle, not the moment, made her heart lurch painfully in her chest. She looked away quickly, blinking fast, afraid of what might spill out if she didn't. That evening, with Adrian away yet again, Daniel suggested they eat together instead of in separate corners of the house. Amara hesitated but eventually agreed, telling herself it was only practical. They dined in the smaller family dining room, not the cavernous hall Adrian preferred. The twins slept nearby in their bassinets, their soft breaths a rhythm in the background. Daniel served the meal himself, the way Adrian never had. He poured her a glass of water, noticed when her fork slipped and picked it up without a word. Small things. Human things. Halfway through the meal, Amara caught him staring at her. His expression wasn't hunger, wasn't pity. It was something far more dangerous. "What?" she asked softly, her voice breaking the quiet. He shook his head, forcing a smile. "Nothing. Just, you laugh differently when it's real." Her throat tightened. She set down her fork, unable to meet his eyes. "Don't say things like that." "Why not?" His voice was low, even, but it pulsed with meaning. "Because it makes it harder to remember what this is." Daniel leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped, his gaze unwavering. "And what is this, Amara?" She swallowed hard, her chest rising and falling too quickly. "You're his cousin. His business partner. This, whatever we're doing, it's wrong." The words trembled out of her, but neither of them could ignore the truth that vibrated between them. If it was wrong, why did it feel so much like the only right thing in her life? Before either could answer, the twins stirred, crying softly. Amara jumped up, relief flooding her, the moment shattered like glass. Daniel followed, quietly soothing one of the babies while Amara tended the other. Their hands brushed in the dim nursery, a whisper of contact that lingered longer than it should have. 2 nights later, a storm rolled in, rain lashing against the windows. Amara couldn't sleep, her mind restless. She stepped onto the balcony, the cold air kissing her skin as she gripped the railing, staring out at the streaks of silver rain. Behind her, the door creaked open. Daniel stepped out, his shirt sleeves rolled, his hair slightly damp from the hall. "You should be asleep," he said softly. "So should you." He came to stand beside her, the storm swirling around them. For a while, they didn't speak. The silence was its own language, heavy but not unbearable. Finally, Amara whispered, "I used to stand here waiting for him, watching the drive, hoping every pair of headlights was his." She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. But he never came. Daniel's jaw flexed. "He doesn't deserve you waiting." Her eyes stung. "Then why am I still waiting?" Daniel turned, his gaze fierce, his voice rough. "Because you haven't realized yet that he's the one who should be waiting for you. That you're the one worth chasing, not the other way around." Her breath caught. She looked at him, rain casting silver lines across his face. "Daniel," she whispered, her heart trembling against its cage. He stepped closer, too close. The rain clung to his skin, his nearness electric. For one unbearable moment, she thought he would kiss her. But instead, he pulled back, turning away, his fists clenched. "I can't. Not like this." Tears blurred her vision. She hated him for his restraint. She loved him for it too. They stood in silence, the storm screaming around them, both prisoners of their own hearts. By the time the rain subsided, Amara was shivering. Daniel draped his jacket over her shoulders without a word, his hand lingering for a heartbeat too long before he withdrew. She clutched the fabric close, inhaling the warmth of him, knowing the memory would cling to her long after the storm passed. Forced proximity had turned into something more. It wasn't just circumstance anymore. It was temptation. It was need. It was a question neither of them dared to answer, yet. The mansion had grown strangely alive with Adrian's absence. Where his presence once demanded silence and formality, now there was warmth. Laughter from the nursery spilled into hallways, small milestones carried the air of victory, and in the quiet hours of night, companionship filled what used to be cavernous loneliness. Amara felt it every day, the shift, the dangerous closeness. She told herself it was for the twins, for their well-being. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. She knew she was inching closer to a line neither of them would be able to redraw once crossed. The twins woke crying at midnight, both restless, demanding comfort at once. Amara rushed in, her robe falling loose around her shoulders, exhaustion in every step. Daniel appeared moments later, his hair tousled, chest rising and falling as if he'd run down the hall. "I'll take her," he said gently, scooping up one of the babies with practiced ease. Amara rocked the other, her eyelids heavy, but as she glanced at him in the dim light, something inside her chest shifted. Daniel cradled the infant against his chest, his deep voice humming softly, the baby's cries settling into quiet whimpers. Amara watched him, transfixed. His strong arms held the child with tenderness, his jaw softened with devotion. Not obligation. Not duty. Love. And for a moment, in that half-light, he looked more like a father than Adrian ever had. "Daniel," she whispered before she could stop herself. He looked up, and the air between them thickened. She shook her head quickly, retreating into silence, but the damage was done. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the breakfast table. The twins cooed in their high chairs, while Daniel prepared bottles with surprising ease. Amara sat opposite, watching him measure formula with precision. "You've done this before," she said, her voice a quiet marvel. He smiled faintly without looking up. "I used to help my sister with her kids. I figured it'd come in handy someday." The words slipped out casually, but they cut her with sudden awareness. Someday. Her throat tightened. Someday with who? Not with her. That couldn't be what he meant. And yet, the way his eyes flicked to hers, full of meaning, told her everything she was afraid to admit. "Daniel," she started, but her voice failed her. He set the bottle down, his hands braced against the counter. "Amara, if I say what I want to say, I don't know if I'll be able to take it back." Her heart pounded. "Then don't." He froze. Her eyes glistened as she forced the words past her lips. "Don't say it. Because if you do, I won't be able to pretend anymore." The silence after her confession was deafening. Daniel's jaw clenched, his chest rising and falling with the weight of restraint. Then one of the twins squealed, breaking the tension. Daniel swallowed hard and turned back to the bottles, his silence answer enough. But both of them knew the wall was crumbling. That evening, Amara found herself wandering into the garden, the sky painted in soft pinks and violets. The roses Adrian had once planted stood in neat rows, immaculate but lifeless in their perfection. She traced her fingers over a bloom, lost in thought, when Daniel's voice came from behind her. "You always come here when you're restless." She turned. He stood with his hands in his pockets, his gaze steady, as if he'd been waiting. "I don't even realize it half the time," she admitted. "Maybe I think if I'm out here long enough, I'll feel like myself again." Daniel stepped closer. "And do you?" Her eyes burned. "No. Because I don't even know who I am anymore." "You're Amara," he said simply, fiercely. "You're the woman who stayed strong when he abandoned you. The woman who carried life alone, and still found a way to smile for her children. You're more than he'll ever see." Her breath hitched, her throat tight. "And what do you see?" The question trembled out of her before she could stop it. Daniel froze. His silence stretched, his eyes burning into hers. He wanted to answer. He needed to. But instead he closed his eyes and muttered, "Don't make me say it." Her chest ached. "Why not?" "Because once I do, there's no going back." She stepped closer, her tears threatening to spill. "Then maybe I don't want to go back." For a heartbeat, they stood inches apart, the garden air charged with every unsaid word, every stolen glance. But Daniel turned sharply, his voice breaking. "Amara, I can't betray him. Even if he's failed you, even if he doesn't deserve you, he's still my blood. My family. And I swore I'd never cross that line." Her tears spilled freely. She whispered, "And what about me, Daniel? Am I not family now?" The question broke something inside him. He reached for her hand, clutching it tight, his forehead leaning against hers as if torn apart by the very nearness he craved. "I don't know how much longer I can keep fighting this," he confessed hoarsely. Neither did she. They pulled apart before it went too far, but both knew the truth. The fight was nearly over. The mansion no longer felt like Adrian's domain. It felt like something else now, a fragile, stolen sanctuary. And though neither dared speak it aloud, both Amara and Daniel knew, it was only a matter of time before their resistance shattered completely. The morning air was cool, tinted with autumn, when Amara found herself in Adrian's study. She hadn't meant to wander there, she rarely entered the room. It always smelled of leather and expensive bourbon, lined with rows of books that Adrian had never read. But today, as the twins napped and Daniel was occupied with a phone call, she lingered in the space that seemed more like a shrine to power than a room for living. Her eyes traced over the heavy mahogany desk, the perfectly aligned pens, the untouched books that were chosen for their gilded spines rather than their content. And then she saw it. A drawer slightly ajar. Something about the imperfection drew her hand. Slowly, she pulled it open. Inside, buried beneath contracts and files, was a photograph. Her breath caught. It was of her, taken years ago, at a charity gala she barely remembered attending. She was smiling in the picture, not at the camera but at someone just out of frame. She turned the photo over, her pulse quickening. On the back, in a script she instantly recognized as Daniel's, were 3 words. Should have been. Amara. She startled, dropping the photo back into the drawer as Daniel appeared in the doorway. His brows furrowed at the sight of her standing at Adrian's desk. Her throat tightened. I was just looking. Daniel's gaze flicked to the drawer, then back to her. For a moment, something raw and unguarded flashed in his eyes before he masked it with calm. You shouldn't be in here, he said quietly, though his voice lacked reprimand. Her hands trembled. Why was there a picture of me in Adrian's drawer, Daniel? With your handwriting on it. He stilled. The silence stretched, heavy, suffocating. His jaw flexed, his hands curling at his sides. For the first time, Daniel looked cornered. Amara, he said finally, his voice low, strained, not here. Not now. Her heart pounded. Then when? Because I think I deserve to know what that meant. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, as though fighting an internal war. When he opened them again, there was no escape in them. Only truth, sharp and unrelenting. Tonight, he said, his voice breaking slightly. I'll tell you tonight. The day dragged like chains. Amara moved through the hours with restless energy, every glance at Daniel thick with unspoken questions. He avoided her eyes, his focus bent on the twins, on phone calls, on anything but her. But she saw the tension in him. The way his shoulders stayed tight, the way his hand lingered on the back of the sofa as though he needed grounding. By evening, when the house finally quieted and the twins slept soundly, Amara stood in the living room, waiting. The fire crackled low, shadows dancing across her face. Daniel entered slowly, his expression grave, as though he carried the weight of years on his back. I met you before he did. The words hung in the air, sharp and shattering. Amara blinked, her lips parting. What? Daniel took a step closer, his hands loose at his sides, his voice trembling despite his controlled tone. It was at that same charity gala. You probably don't remember. You were wearing a blue dress, standing by the balcony, trying to escape the crowd. Her breath caught. She did remember, faintly. The night had been a blur of polite laughter and fake smiles, but she remembered the balcony. The sense of relief in the cool night air. You looked untouchable, Daniel continued, his voice low. But then you smiled at me. And for the first time in years, I felt something I didn't think I was allowed to feel. Her chest constricted. Daniel. I wanted to ask your name. I wanted to keep you talking all night. But before I could, he swallowed hard. Adrian came. And he saw you. And when he wanted something, there was no competing. Not then. Not ever. Amara's legs weakened. She sank onto the edge of the sofa, her hands trembling in her lap. Daniel remained standing, his eyes dark with old battles. He claimed you before I had the chance. And I told myself it didn't matter. That it was better for you to be with him, wealthy, powerful, able to give you everything I couldn't. Her tears blurred her vision. But it did matter. His voice cracked. It mattered every day. Every time I saw you smile at him, every time I watched him treat you like an ornament. It killed me, Amara. Because I knew what I would have given you. What I still want to give you. The confession burned the air between them, searing, undeniable. For a long moment, neither moved. The fire popped in the hearth, a log collapsing into embers. Amara's heart thundered, her tears spilling freely. She lifted her gaze to him, seeing not just the man who stood before her, but the years he had buried his truth. All the nights he had watched her suffer in silence. All the times he had bitten back words that would have unraveled everything. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. Daniel's laugh was hollow, broken. "What good would it have done? You were his. And I thought if I buried it deep enough, it would die. But then—" He gestured helplessly toward the ceiling, toward the nursery where the twins slept. His voice softened, raw. "Then he left. And I couldn't stand by anymore, not when you were breaking, and I knew I could help hold you together." Her chest ached with 1,000 conflicting truths. Guilt, longing, anger, relief, and love, wild, terrifying, undeniable love. She rose slowly, her knees weak. "Daniel." But before she could step closer, before she could surrender, Daniel turned sharply, his eyes wet, his jaw hard. "No," he rasped. "Don't. If you come any closer, Amara, I won't stop. And if I cross that line, there's no undoing it." Her tears fell harder. She wrapped her arms around herself, trembling, every part of her screaming to go to him, to let him shatter the last wall between them. But instead, she whispered, "Then what do we do?" Daniel's chest heaved. "We wait. We fight it. Until we can't anymore." And with that, he turned and left the room, leaving Amara shaking by the fire, her heart split wide open. That night, Amara lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Daniel's confession echoing in her head. "I met you before he did. It should have been me." And she knew, no matter how hard they tried to resist, their past had already rewritten their present. The truth was out. And the truth demanded to be faced. The confession sat in Amara's chest like a stone. "I met you before he did. It should have been me." She moved through the following day in a haze. Every sound seemed sharper, the twins' cries, the ticking of the grandfather clock, the echo of Daniel's footsteps in the hall. And every time she caught sight of him, her heart stuttered, torn between wanting to run to him and needing to preserve the fragile boundary they had clung to for so long. At breakfast, the silence was unbearable. Daniel sat opposite her, pouring coffee with steady hands, but the muscles in his jaw ticked with restraint. Amara fed the twins spoonfuls of soft cereal, her fingers shaking as much as theirs. Finally, she broke. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Daniel's eyes flicked to hers, dark and pained. "Because it wouldn't have changed anything." "Yes, it would have," she whispered fiercely, leaning forward. "I would have seen you differently. I would have known I wasn't losing my mind for feeling this pull between us." Daniel's hand tightened around his mug. "Amara, if I had told you, you would have been trapped in a war between us. Between me and him. And I couldn't do that to you." Her throat ached. "But you did. Because now I know. And I can't unknow it." The silence after her words was heavy, both of them knowing she was right. Later that day, Amara found herself in the nursery, humming softly as the twins played. Daniel leaned against the doorway, watching quietly. "You looked so fragile that night on the balcony," he said suddenly, his voice soft, unguarded. "But when you smiled at me, I knew you were stronger than anyone in that room." Amara turned slowly, her heart thudding. "And you didn't say a word." He shook his head, a bitter smile on his lips. "Because I knew Adrian would swoop in. He always did. He wanted everything I wanted, only he had the means to take it. And when he saw you, I knew I'd already lost." Her eyes filled with tears. "But you didn't lose me, Daniel. Not really. Because all this time part of me—" She stopped, her voice breaking, unable to confess what her heart screamed. Daniel stepped forward, but stopped short of reaching her, his fists curling at his sides. "Don't finish that sentence unless you're ready to set fire to everything." Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Maybe it's already burning. The twins babbled happily between them, their tiny voices unaware of the storm unraveling over their heads. That evening, Adrian called. Amara answered with Daniel standing nearby, silent, listening. Adrian's voice was smooth, almost bored. "I'll be home in a week. There are things we need to discuss." Amara swallowed hard. The children. Yes, of course. But more importantly, the merger. "I'll need Daniel on it as soon as I return." Her grip on the phone tightened. "Do you even hear yourself? Our son was sick days ago. We went to the hospital. And you. He's fine, isn't he?" Adrian cut in, irritation dripping from his voice. "Don't dramatize. You know stress isn't good for your image, Amara." Her vision blurred with hot tears. She couldn't speak. She handed the phone to Daniel, her hands trembling. Daniel's voice when he spoke was steel. "Adrian, you need to start paying attention to what matters. Your wife, your children." "They're my family, Daniel," Adrian snapped. "Not yours. Don't forget your place." Daniel's jaw flexed, but his tone stayed calm. "If you keep treating them like pawns, one day you'll come home and realize you've lost them." The line went dead. Amara covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. Daniel placed the phone aside, then crouched in front of her, his eyes burning with quiet fury. "You don't deserve this," he said, voice trembling. Her tears spilled freely. "Then why am I still here?" His hand hovered near hers, aching to hold her. "Because you're waiting for a man who's never going to show up." Their eyes locked, the truth raw between them. That night, Amara stood outside the nursery door, watching Daniel from the shadows. He was holding their daughter, humming softly, swaying with a patience and tenderness that pierced her to the core. Her chest ached so fiercely she couldn't stay silent. "Daniel." He turned, startled. Their daughter giggled in his arms, oblivious to the storm of emotion swirling between the adults. "You look like her father," Amara whispered. Daniel's throat worked. "Maybe I wish I was." Her breath caught. The words slipped out of her before she could stop them. "Maybe I wish you were too." The silence after was unbearable. Daniel froze, his jaw tight, his eyes shimmering with restrained anguish. "Amara," he whispered hoarsely. "Don't say that unless you mean it." She stepped closer, trembling, tears streaking her cheeks. "What if I do?" Daniel's breath shuddered out. He turned away sharply, clutching the baby tighter, as if she were the only thing keeping him grounded. "Then it's too late. Because the moment we admit it, we destroy everything." Her tears fell harder, her voice breaking. "Then maybe everything deserves to be destroyed." The baby squealed happily in his arms, the only light sound in a room thick with forbidden longing. That night, Amara lay awake, Daniel's words echoing in her head. "Maybe I wish I was. Don't say that unless you mean it." The truth was out in pieces, scattered across moments too powerful to bury again. And though neither of them had said the words outright, both knew they were already standing in a fire that couldn't be contained much longer. The night after Adrian's call, Amara couldn't sleep. The storm of his indifference, Daniel's quiet fire, and the weight of her own unraveling emotions pressed down on her chest until she could hardly breathe. She wandered the halls of the mansion barefoot, the polished wood cool beneath her skin, the silence heavy with unspoken truths. She found herself drawn to Daniel's study. The door was ajar, a sliver of golden lamplight spilling into the hall. Inside, Daniel sat at his desk, head bowed, papers scattered across the wood. She almost turned away, but then her eyes caught on something, a photograph lying just off center. Amara stepped inside before she realized what she was doing. Daniel looked up sharply, his expression a mask of surprise and then resignation. The photograph was old, slightly faded. It was of her, Amara, on the balcony of that charity gala, smiling uncertainly at the camera. She remembered the moment, remembered how the lights had glittered behind her like falling stars, remembered how unseen she had felt in that crowd. Her breath caught. "You kept this." Daniel's throat worked, but he didn't move to hide it. It wasn't supposed to be out. Her hand trembled as she picked it up. "All this time, you held on to me?" He stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. "It wasn't about holding on. It was about remembering what I couldn't have." Her tears burned. "But you could have, Daniel. You could have said something." He shook his head, pain twisting across his features. "No. Adrian saw you first that night. He made his move, and once he did, there was no undoing it. He had everything, the wealth, the charm, the boldness. I had nothing but restraint. And you deserved more than a man who loved you in silence." Amara's chest ached so fiercely she pressed her hand over her heart. "But what if I didn't want silence? What if I wanted you?" Daniel's breath shuddered out, his composure fracturing. "Then I failed us both." Before Amara could speak, her eyes fell on a leather-bound journal beside the photograph. Her fingers brushed against it, and Daniel's hand shot out instinctively to stop her. But she had already seen her name scrawled across the edge of a page. Her voice was trembling when she whispered, "You wrote about me?" Daniel closed his eyes, his hand falling away. "Amara." She opened it before he could stop her. The ink was faded in some entries, bold in others, but every page breathed with the same truth. Daniel had been watching, protecting, yearning for her long before Adrian ever abandoned her. She skimmed through fragments. She doesn't see how she lights up a room. Adrian doesn't deserve her laughter. He won't keep it safe. I'll stand back. It's the only way I can love her without destroying her life. Her tears blurred the words, her chest heaving. "Daniel, you loved me all along." He turned away sharply, gripping the edge of his desk until his knuckles whitened. "Don't say it like that. Like it's simple. Like it's not forbidden. But it's the truth." Her voice broke. "And all this time, I thought I was alone." The sound of a door slamming echoed down the hall. Both froze. Adrian's voice carried through the mansion, sharp and commanding. "Amara? Daniel." Her blood ran cold. He wasn't supposed to be home yet. Daniel's jaw tightened. He grabbed the journal and shoved it into a drawer, locking it with trembling hands. He turned to Amara, his face pale but steady. "You have to go back to your room. Now." She shook her head, her tears still glistening. "Not after this. Not after what I just learned." Daniel's eyes pleaded. "If he sees you here, if he suspects." "Then let him suspect," she whispered fiercely. "Because I can't keep living like I don't know the truth." The footsteps grew closer. Adrian's shadow loomed against the wall, stretching long and dark. Adrian entered the study, his smile sharp and his eyes calculating. "Well, well. What do we have here?" Amara's heart pounded, but Daniel stepped slightly in front of her, his posture protective. "Nothing. We were just talking." Adrian's gaze slid between them, narrowing. "Talking? At midnight? In my study?" Amara flinched, but then something inside her hardened. She straightened her shoulders. "Maybe if you were ever here, Adrian, you wouldn't have to wonder what your wife and cousin are doing." His eyes flashed, his smile vanishing. "Careful, Amara." Daniel's voice was low, steady. Don't speak to her like that. Adrian turned slowly to him, disbelief flickering across his face. And since when do you give orders in this house, Daniel? Don't forget, you work for me. The tension was electric, the silence charged with years of resentment and buried truth. Amara looked between them, her pulse racing. This was it. The collision. The truth hovering like a blade above all of them. Adrian's eyes narrowed suddenly, suspicion hardening into realization. His gaze flicked to Amara, then back to Daniel, his lips curling into a cruel smile. "Oh," he said softly. "Now I see it. The way you look at her. The way she looks back. God, Daniel, you've been in love with her all along, haven't you?" Daniel's body went rigid, but he didn't deny it. His silence was louder than any words. Amara's breath caught. Adrian turned to her, his eyes cold. "And you? Did you ever love me at all? Or was I just the wrong brother all along?" Her tears spilled over, but she didn't look away. "You were never the right one, Adrian. You just got there first." The words sliced through the air, irreversible, undeniable. Adrian's face twisted with rage. His fists clenched, his jaw grinding. "You ungrateful." Daniel stepped forward, his voice thunderous. "Don't you dare." For a moment, the world seemed to stop, three hearts colliding in the wreckage of truth, no more lies left to hide behind. Adrian stormed out, his voice echoing down the hall. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." Amara's body shook, but Daniel caught her before she crumbled, his arms strong, his breath ragged against her hair. "It's out now," he whispered, his voice breaking. "There's no going back." And though terror coursed through her veins, a strange, dangerous relief swelled in Amara's chest. For the first time, everything was in the open, and nothing would ever be the same again. Now that Daniel's hidden past feelings for Amara are revealed, do you believe she should see it as betrayal, or as proof that his love was always there? Share your opinion in the comments. Your take could be the deciding perspective. The house was still trembling in the aftermath of Adrian's storm. His voice lingered in the walls, his rage echoing down the corridors long after his footsteps had faded. Amara stood in the nursery doorway, staring at her sleeping twins. Their faces were peaceful, untouched by the war that had just erupted under their roof. She wished she could join them in that innocent sleep, but her veins were fire, her chest a cage too small for her pounding heart. Behind her, Daniel leaned against the wall, his shoulders slumped. For once, he didn't try to be composed. His hands covered his face, fingers pressing into his temples as though he could hold back the tide of everything that had just spilled out. Amara turned slowly. Her voice was barely a whisper. "It's done now, isn't it?" "He knows." Daniel's hands dropped, his eyes meeting hers. "He suspects. And suspicion is almost worse than certainty. He'll dig, he'll test, he'll push." Her throat tightened. "And us?" Daniel's chest rose and fell with a shuddering breath. "Us, we're standing on the edge of something we can't step back from." The honesty in his voice stripped away the last of her defenses. She stepped forward, trembling. "Then stop holding me at arm's length, Daniel. Stop pretending we don't both feel it." For a moment, he didn't move. His eyes closed, his jaw clenched, as if her words were a blade he wanted to both pull out and push deeper. Then he whispered, "Amara," her name breaking on his lips. She reached for him, her fingers brushing his arm. "I'm tired of being alone in a marriage that doesn't exist. Tired of living in a house that feels like a prison. And you," her voice broke, "you've been here all along, loving me in silence." His composure cracked. He caught her hand, pressed it against his chest where his heart thundered. "You think it's been easy? Watching you every day, knowing you were his? Knowing I could never touch you?" Tears spilled from her eyes. "And yet you did. You touched me, in every way he never did. You were there when I was broken. You carried me through the fire. You're the only reason I'm still standing." The words hung between them, heavy and trembling. Daniel's hand moved slowly, almost reverently, to cup her cheek. His thumb brushed her tears away, his touch so tender it made her ache. She leaned into it, her eyes fluttering shut. "Amara," he whispered again, his voice raw. "If I cross this line, there's no going back." Her lips parted, her breath warm against his palm. "Then don't go back. Please." For a moment, the world stilled. The only sounds were their ragged breaths, the faint rain tapping against the window panes, and the soft sighs of the twins sleeping nearby. Then Daniel bent his forehead to hers, his body trembling. "God help me," he murmured, and the distance that had held them apart for so long dissolved. Their lips met, not in a rush, but in a slow, desperate surrender. Years of silence poured into that kiss, restraint breaking, truth unfolding, hearts colliding. Amara clung to him, her hands fisting in his shirt as though she'd drown if she let go. Daniel's arms wrapped around her with a ferocity that spoke of all the nights he had dreamed but denied himself. The kiss deepened, raw and aching, until the weight of their lives threatened to crush them. Finally, breathless, Daniel pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "This shouldn't be happening," he whispered, though his hand still held her like he'd never let go. Her tears glistened, but her voice was steady. "It already has." Later, when the intensity of that moment gave way to fragile peace, they sat side by side on the nursery floor, their backs against the wall, the twins gurgling in their crib. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, shaking his head with a helpless laugh. "Do you realize what we've done?" Amara smiled through her tears, nudging his shoulder. "Yes. And I don't regret it." He looked at her, his eyes softening, something like relief flickering there. "You always had a way of making me laugh when I shouldn't. Even back then, on that balcony. I thought you'd see right through me, the way my heart was pounding." Her brows lifted. "You were nervous?" He chuckled, low and self-deprecating. "Terrified. And then you smiled, and I thought, God, if I could just be the one to keep that smile safe, I'd never ask for anything else." Amara leaned her head on his shoulder, her eyes closing. "And you did. You kept me safe. Even when I didn't realize it." For the first time in a long time, Daniel let out a full, unguarded laugh. It was warm, rich, and it wrapped around her like a blanket. The night stretched on, and the weight between them shifted into something gentler. They shared stories, fragments of their lives they had never dared to speak. Amara told him about the loneliness of the hospital room, how she had thought she'd die of both pain and abandonment. Daniel told her how he'd sat outside that very room, ready to break Adrian's neck for leaving her there. Their words were quiet, but their truths were loud. At one point, Amara's hand drifted into Daniel's without thinking, their fingers weaving together easily, naturally, as though they'd been made to fit. She whispered, "We're already a family, Daniel. We just never admitted it." His grip tightened, his voice breaking. "I've wanted to hear you say that for so long." As dawn approached, the storm outside subsided. The first light of morning filtered through the curtains, painting the nursery in soft gold. Amara sat with Daniel on the floor, the twins giggling in their crib, sunlight dancing across their faces. For the first time in years, she felt something she had forgotten was possible: peace. Daniel brushed a strand of hair from her face, his eyes full of wonder and fear and love all at once. "Whatever happens next, Amara, I won't let you go through it alone." Her smile trembled, but it was real. "And I won't let you love me in silence anymore." They sat like that, hand in hand, as the morning bloomed around them, knowing that the bond they had just forged was stronger than any storm Adrian could bring. The morning sunlight streamed into the nursery, soft and forgiving, as though the night storm had washed the world clean. Amara sat on the rug with the twins, stacking colorful wooden blocks while Daniel lay stretched out nearby, one arm propped under his head. For once there was no tension, no shadows, no unspoken fears. Just the simple rhythm of family. The twins squealed with delight as Amara built a tower, only for Daniel to send it toppling with a playful flick of his finger. "You did that on purpose," Amara accused, laughing despite herself. Daniel smirked, shrugging. "Maybe I did. Or maybe gravity's just on my side." The twins clapped at the chaos, and Daniel reached over to tickle their tiny feet until their giggles filled the room. Amara watched him, her heart swelling in a way that was both terrifying and beautiful. This is what it should have been all along. Later in the kitchen, Daniel made pancakes while Amara sat on the counter, swinging her legs like a girl half her age. "You're surprisingly good at this," she teased, watching him flip a pancake with expert ease. He raised an eyebrow. "Surprisingly? What did you expect, that I'd burn the place down?" She grinned. "Well, you've always been the composed businessman. I didn't know you had domestic skills too." Daniel glanced back at her, smirking. "Don't tell anyone. It might ruin my reputation." She chuckled, then fell quiet, her gaze softening as she watched him. "You'd make a good father, Daniel." His movements slowed. He set the spatula down carefully, his back still to her. "Don't say that, Amara." "But it's true," she pressed gently. "You already are. You've been more of a father to them than," her voice faltered, but she didn't need to finish. They both knew who she meant. Daniel turned then, his eyes meeting hers. The vulnerability in them stole her breath. "Don't make me want what I can't have." Her heart ached. She slid down from the counter, stepping closer. "But what if you can have it? What if we stop pretending it's impossible?" For a moment, his hand twitched as though he wanted to reach for her. But instead, he stepped back, shaking his head. "Amara," his voice was hoarse. "If I let myself believe that, I won't be able to stop." In the afternoon, they took the twins into the garden. The air was fresh, carrying the faint scent of roses. Amara pushed the stroller while Daniel walked beside her, their shoulders almost brushing. The children babbled happily, pointing at the fluttering butterflies. Daniel bent to pick a small daisy and tucked it gently into Amara's hair. She froze, her heart hammering. He smiled softly. "There. Perfect." Her breath caught. "You can't do things like that." "Why not?" His voice was light, but his eyes were heavy with meaning. "Because it feels like," she trailed off, unable to find the words. "Feels like what?" he asked, his gaze searching hers. Her lips trembled. "Feels like home." Daniel stopped walking, his hand tightening on the stroller handle. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Maybe that's what we've both been searching for all along." For a long moment, they just stood there, the sunlight spilling over them, the twins laughing in their stroller. It felt like a promise, fragile but real. That evening, after the twins were asleep, Amara and Daniel sat in the living room with glasses of wine. The fire crackled softly, casting shadows across their faces. Amara sipped her drink, her cheeks warm. "Do you ever think about it?" Daniel tilted his head. "About what?" "A different life. One where it was you and me from the start." His eyes darkened. He swirled the wine in his glass, his voice low. "Every day. Every damn day." Her heart twisted. "What does it look like?" He glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. We'd live somewhere quieter. A small house by the coast, maybe. The kids would run wild in the sand. You'd laugh more. His voice faltered, and he looked away. I'd finally feel like I wasn't stealing someone else's place. Tears stung her eyes. She set her glass down and reached for his hand. Daniel, you've never stood